What's up, Warriors, and welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Movement Podcast, Voice for the Voiceless. I am your host, Chris. Before we get started with today's guest, I just want to say thank you guys so much for your support for my recent podcast that just came out with Karen in South Africa. I know we had a little bit of technical difficulties throughout the podcast, but please do feel free to listen to the episode. It's a very, very powerful testament. I love everything that Karen is doing. So, Karen, if you do end up hearing this podcast, thank you so much for that episode. It was very enlightening and very powerful for the content that we were able to get recorded. So, thank you again. Today's guest is a therapist, an author, an advocate, and also a podcaster. Please help me welcome Vanity Dawson. Vanity, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing good. How are you
I'm
today?
doing good. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. We had a really good conversation when I was on your podcast, so I figured it's my turn to interview you.
I love it. It's like
Um,
my turn.
so I guess let's start with just the basic question. Where does this journey begin for you? What made you want to step into the field of becoming a therapist?
Oh man, that is a loaded question. I never actually planned on being a therapist. So you know how like people are children or you're a child and they say, "Oh, I want to be a policeman when I grow up." Or I want to be this when I grow up, a nurse or a doctor. Well, that's not what it was for me. I wanted to be a baker and a banker. So, and I did that. I didn't realize that I was stepping into the world of therapy till like 2017. And that started while I was in my career as a Air Force veteran. I was doing some victim advocacy work for military members in the Air Force who's experienced sexual assault. Part of that entailed doing training members on sexual assault prevention and bystander intervention. So teaching them like, hey, you have a part to prevent sexual assault and harassment. So I started there, and it's actually where my healing journey started too. But that's when I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go to school and for psychology. And I was a business major. I always tell my story. I started out as a business major, like I was in college forever. Okay. Like I failed out of school just because of life and stuff. Like I started college when I graduated high school and I just like never finished it. It was just taking a class here, there, skipping semesters. And it wasn't until I got into the psychology major, I just kind of like took off. Like, I mean, I was awarded scholarships and everything for doing good work. And then I was like, all right, what next? And God led me to a master's program. So I thought I was going to start my doctorate and I'm starting my application. And then I seen another program, specifically clinical mental health counseling. So I applied and got in, and here I am, a therapist. It's pretty interesting how I got here.
So you had mentioned when you were doing the stuff with the Air Force, it kind of started your journey of healing. So
Yeah.
what what made you want to step into, I'm assuming, like, did you start going to therapy yourself while you were doing that as well?
Well, I've been in therapy ever since I was a young girl for different things.
Mhm.
When I got into the Air Force, so my career field was airfield management, something totally different than what I'm doing now.
Right.
I loved my job, by the way. And what was required was all of the members had to sit for annual SAPR training.
Mhm.
SAPR is sexual assault prevention. Okay. It's required. Everybody has to do the training once a year. So I was sitting for the training when I first got in, and this was like going into like 2013 and forward. So it really started then, 2013, 14, 15. And I'm sitting in these trainings torn. Like I don't want to be in the training because I was still harboring a lot of emotions and just pain from my childhood experiences of abuse and even some adulthood trauma as well. So I was harboring this pain and I'm sitting in these trainings and it was triggering everything in me. Like I hated it. And I was like, how do they do this? Why do they do this? Why do we gotta sit for this? So I'm sitting in it, and then, oh my gosh, when they do the training, when they started, everybody comes in the room. And then they say, oh, if you're triggered, you can leave out. That's what they say. So you're just sitting there. I would sit there and I laugh at it now, but I would sit there because I was like, oh man, if I get up now after everybody's all quiet, then they're gonna know something's wrong.
Yeah.
So I was feeling like shame and guilt and embarrassed. So I was like, I gotta sit through this. And the videos that they would show was so graphic. Like they would show um videos of people being assaulted. Like these scenarios, like they would create these scenarios for people to get the point. Eventually they stopped showing those specific graphic videos that they were showing. And I would just be so triggered. And I ended up eventually talking to a victim advocate. And this was one year I was like, I can't go into this training. This is why I spoke up. And then she was like, she planted a seed. She was like, have you thought about being a victim advocate? I
Hmm.
was just like, no.
Because I would
No.
assume that would continue that triggering for you,
I was like, no.
right?
But eventually I ended up doing it. And it was a 40-week training. I started my training in like October 2016. And it's like 40 week, 40 hours, 1 week of training. You were talking about so many different things. And you're like going through work for yourself as you're going through the training. So I'm grateful that I did the training. It helped me a lot. It helps me heal.
I think the most important thing here I want to take out of this so far is I like how transparent you are about you yourself going to therapy while being a therapist because I feel like so many people, including myself, sometimes forget that our therapists are people. They don't always have to be on. So I
Yeah.
guess that kind of leads me to a question for you. How do you hit that off switch when you're not with clients? Because I feel like you're kind of always in that mode, like trying to help people because it's just force a
Yeah.
habit, having a big heart. How do you find yourself separating your job from your personal?
Mhm. That's a good question. So I believe that there's a couple things. I believe all the trainings that I have sat in because you know, vicarious trauma is real, right? And or like burnout. And just from the victim advocacy training, I've done a lot of training for it. Like even when I got out the military, going into the federal government as a victim advocate coordinator, you go off to school specifically for being a victim advocate, and you just learn so much. Part of that training was learning to take care of yourself.
Mhm.
Like it's just stamped in you, okay? So I believe like I felt like that was like kind of like the fun part of training is like, okay, well, make sure I do this so I don't get burnt out and not want to do the work,
Right.
right? I wasn't always a therapist, so I didn't really start doing therapy until 2020. So I started the victim advocacy first. So a lot of times I was able to take some of the things that I learned from being a victim advocate and bringing it over into the therapy world, even though they teach you these things, but I learned from when I was a VA. Um, then also I believe that God has given me the grace to do this work. Part of that is taking care of myself, like knowing when to put the phone down, turn it off, and being aware that I'm doing that, right? The messages come. Some of my clients, I say, hey, you can text me. Not all my clients, but some of them. And they understand when I don't respond right away. They know, like, I'm a human too, right? I need to take care of me so I could pour out into them. So I make sure that I do things for me so I can feel relaxed, so I
Right.
don't feel anxious. And even when I am like feeling like I am carrying the weight of the world, I remember, okay, what am I teaching my clients? I need to do that.
Yeah. So more or less taking lessons out of your sessions with your
Hmm.
clients for yourself as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think the most important part there too is self-care. It's something
Yeah.
that so many of us forget to do. Like sometimes I'll have a full bottle of water here my entire 8-hour day of work, and I'll forget to drink it, and I'll just be dehydrated by the end of the day because I'm like, why am I so thirsty? Oh, I haven't touched my
Is it a
water.
water?
And it's funny. Right. I always gotta have it right next to you. And it's funny because like when I first started therapy, it was about 20, well,
Hmm.
technically 2018, I believe, after my second attempt, was when I started therapy officially. The therapist I have now, who I've had for about 5 years now, I started in like right in the middle of the pandemic. So it went from a person to person session or being our first session to, oh, let's adjust to remote therapy. So that was an adjustment for me. But
Yeah.
getting sidetracked, I apologize. Um,
That was
but
fun.
when she started mentioning self-care, I'm like, what is self-care? I don't know what self-care is. I was never brought up with self-care. It's
Hmm.
never take care of yourself. It's make sure you do good to the people around you. But I, I've never practiced self-care growing up. So
Yeah.
I think that is a really important thing for all my listeners and yourself and myself included. Just self-care is one of the most important parts of this healing journey and knowing how to do it.
It is. And a lot of people don't even know how to do it.
Right. So what does
Like,
self-care look like for you?
um, so sleep was my thing. Listen, I loved a good nap. And as you get older and grow in life, your habits can change. I loved a nap. It was something special about just laying in my bed. That was self-care to me. While also, but I would balance that. I would also go outdoors, like outdoor stuff. So I would do activities like hike, baking. Baking was an outlet for me. Baking was actually an outlet for me while I was in domestic violence. So that was my self-care in there, even though I was in that situation. But guess what? As I transitioned out of that and learned other things, I baking wasn't my self-care skill, right? It changed. And now I do things like that I enjoy. I go explore new activities. So I like things like afternoon tea or sitting by the water, writing, things like that. That brings me peace. And it also brings me joy.
So you had mentioned your faith a little bit or
Mhm.
a little bit ago. So how do you integrate faith and resilience into your counseling approach?
Mm. Whew. I would not be able to counsel without having faith in God. It is the Lord who called me to the work that I do.
Mhm.
So I have to fully rely on him. Also, it is how I don't get burnt out. So I, confidentiality is important, right?
Right.
We're not just going to share everybody's business with everybody, right? But I go in prayer, right? I pray to get strategy. I had to learn to take those burdens because people are pouring into my cup, right? But it's not always the right things that are good for me. So I have to give those things to God. And a lot of clients that I see also, they were looking for therapists who is grounded in Christ. And that's like a win-win. Because, we could use the Bible as the foundation, scripture.
So I guess to follow up on that question is, have you ever ran into a client that maybe wasn't too heavy on their belief system, like just kind of looking for a therapist and they happen to match with you and happen to vibe with the kind of sessions that you produce? I guess, have you ever ran into a client where they weren't really big on the faith aspect
Mhm.
of what you
I've
do?
had lots of clients like that. And I'm thankful and grateful for them. Why? It teaches me that we get a diverse group of clients. Everybody is not going to have the same beliefs as I do. Everybody thinks differently. Everybody has different experiences. I would never force my faith onto somebody else. Why? That'll push them away.
Right, right.
And my job is to help them, not hurt them more than what they're hurting.
Yeah,
I've had lots of clients who do not believe, and we've worked very well together. And that was actually one when I first started out in the therapy field, I was actually nervous how that would work.
right,
But now I do know how it works. Now, some people, they don't like it and they'll go. That's their decision, right? Because we get to choose who we want to do therapy with, right? And then some people will stay. So it's very diverse and I love it. And I'm really thankful that I've had the opportunity and chance to work with both.
right.
And, I wouldn't never turn somebody away just because, they don't have the same faith as I do.
And I think that's really important, especially when there are so many people in this world that might have trauma due to a faith-based system they were
Right.
brought up with. So I
Mhm.
can only imagine how nervous you were, how that conversation
I was like, how's
would
this
look.
gonna work?
And can you share a little bit about your journey in founding the Take My Hand Counseling? And when did it grow into your current podcast?
Okay, so take my hand. I was like, I was still in before it became a practice. This started when I was in domestic violence. I remember calling, I was in Maryland, and I remember calling the business people that like the people that set up your business. I can't remember their names. And I was like, I said, I want to trademark this name, right? Or I want to, secure it. And I did. And before I even knew what it was going to be, Take My Hand stood out to me. I was like, this is a brand for me. This was near and dear to my heart. And then over the years, I received more clarity on what exactly Take My Hand is and who it's for, right? We help people. Nobody has to go through a healing journey alone. And there were times where I felt like I was going through my healing journey alone. And I felt like the Lord was saying, take my hand. We're going to walk through this together. And it reminds me of the scripture in Isaiah 41, where God says, fear not, be not dismayed. For hold on, let me see the scripture. He says, fear not, be not dismayed, I will help you. And he said, I will hold you up in my righteous right hand. That's a scripture. But a couple verses down, he also talks about hold, fear not. He says, fear not again. And he said he will we can hold his we will hold his right hand. And that just stood out to me over the years. Like I don't have to fear, right? I don't have to be dismayed, that I don't have to walk through life by myself. I don't have to heal alone. I could take his hand. So that's where it came from. And now the podcast that I have, or I call it my talk show, because I do like to talk. um Survivor Talks, it comes from that, to let people know that we all have a story to tell. Like our testimony will set us free. Our testimony sets other people free. And our testimony will empower somebody else to start their healing journey, and they can look for the right support to move forward. So that's where that came from.
I love it. I love it. When I started the Facebook group and it eventually turned into the podcast, when I was coming up with the name, I was just kind of like, I feel like my story is a testament to all the men that don't get to tell their story because, it's we talked about it on your show. The numbers of suicide are disheartening, and it
Yeah.
doesn't discriminate on age or gender. It doesn't matter. And when I started the podcast and I called it what I called it, I'm like, it makes sense. The name makes so much sense to me because I'm not afraid to tell my story. And when I started telling my story and the amount of people that followed behind me, it just re-solidified what we're trying to do. What you're
Mhm.
trying to do with your podcast, what I'm trying to do with mine. And I
Mhm.
feel like we're doing such important work because there are still so many people that are afraid to tell their
Yeah.
story. And all of those people that I've met over the last 4 or 5 years have opened up so much. They're a completely different person because we started telling our stories, because we started the podcast, because you started your practice. So I think what we're both doing is just incredible, and I absolutely love that you incorporated faith into the name that you chose for the counseling, and I love the name of your talk show, of course.
Thank you. And people wouldn't even know it until I say it.
Yeah,
It's just take my hand.
yeah, it's great, and
Like,
it's
okay.
it's a great play off of that scripture. I love it.
Thank you. And I love what you're doing too, giving people that space to talk about their traumas is important, because so many people are, burying their experiences, and they need a place to be able to release it. I think it's also important that people understand that even when you do share your story or your experience, everybody may not understand, and that is okay. It may not make sense to everybody, but that's all right.
Yeah,
Share it anyway.
yeah, exactly.
Share it
And
anyway.
I remember a friend Ashley that I have who's been part of the group since I started it. Very to herself, very quiet, didn't ever say anything. And then over like the last 3 years, I kid you not, Vanity, she's like the most talkative person I've ever met. And it's crazy because I'm like, and I was telling her after her son was born, I'm like, the complete 180 you did is incredible. And I really want you to see how much of a difference you made in your life because just being able to speak out and help other people while doing better for yourself speaks volumes to your character. And I feel like that's something we should do for ourselves too, is recognize all the change that we're doing and recognize the impact we're making on everybody's life. Because um, I had a guest on here, I think about 2 episodes ago. He was a doctor. And he's been practicing, I believe, for over 20 years, I think.
Um,
And he said when he was at the end of his 8 years of training, he felt imposter syndrome because he ran into a client he didn't know how to fix. And I'm like, wait a minute, a doctor with a doctorate? Like, you felt that? Like, I thought that was only people like me that experienced that because like I don't have a degree in anything,
yeah.
but it's like we need to realize that at the end of the day, no matter how many titles we have under our names, no matter how much money we have in the bank account, we're all human beings trying to make a difference. So you're making a difference. Everybody that we're helping it's incredible.
Thank you. And we're not meant to fix everybody.
Exactly.
Everybody is not our assignment. That's not our job. We cannot fix everybody. It's not even us fixing people. We're helping them. We're giving them tools. We're walking with them. They're the ones. I always tell my clients, I say, hey, therapy works when you make it work. Meaning you have to put in the work. It's not going to work if you don't put in the work.
That part.
I wouldn't be where I am today if I did not put in the work.
Absolutely.
I didn't challenge my thought processes, if I didn't challenge the things that I was saying that was negative about myself, or taking the things that all of the therapists that I've worked with were given to me, or just even mentors, right? Or people that I trusted that had sound advice. If I didn't utilize that, because God put these people in my life, right? If I didn't take what they were giving me and actually applying it, I probably wouldn't be where I am today this quick.
Right. And
Right?
you said the quiet part out loud is you got to do the work. And I feel like that's what so many people don't understand when it comes to making changes in their life. Like, yeah, okay, you can start a diet, but you got to stay consistent. Yeah, you can go to therapy, but you need to put a plan together on how to get better for yourself. Because
Yeah.
your guys' job essentially is to put somebody on the path and just try to give advice while they're walking that path. Sometimes
Mhm.
people are going to veer off. I've veered off plenty of times, but
Mhm. Mhm.
it's up to us to make sure that we're going that straight line. We're not all going to stay in that straight line. But if you're not doing the work, you're going to fall off probably every day, you
Or
know?
even be at a standstill,
Yeah,
This is what they call the stuck points. And, I've done this too. Like, you can get to a point in therapy where it hurts so much that you quit therapy. You're not ready to deal with certain issues. Like I said, I'm very transparent. I've quit therapy. I've quit trauma therapy. I've quit it because I wasn't ready to deal with certain issues from my
yeah.
past.
Because some of those wounds are still so fresh.
hmm And I didn't quit right away. My brain would start forgetting that I had an
Mhm.
appointment
Hmm.
because my mind was trying to protect me. Like, this doesn't feel safe to talk
Right.
about. So I started forgetting.
Interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah. And I was like, and I was very aware of it after the fact. I was like, this is what's happening. That's an issue. I need to do
So,
it.
being a therapist, I have this question for you. What would you say to those people that have gone through several therapists and are unsure about going to another therapist because maybe they had bad experiences with every single one of them and they're on the verge of giving up? What would you say to those people?
Why are you going to different therapists? Is the therapist the right fit for you, or are you running?
Mm,
Are you running away
mm,
from the issues you don't want to deal with? When we do consultations, part of intake process also and consults is, have you ever been in therapy before? And we get that information, we collect that. If they have been, one of the questions asked is, okay, why did you leave that therapist? Or why did you leave this place? Right? There are people that's been to two or three counselors within a year. So, and I'm not talking about the type where, oh, let's see if we're a good fit, one or two sessions, just like, no, we're talking about a change every 7 months or something.
right.
It's like, okay, what are you running from? Like I said, some things hurt so much, we're not ready to deal with those issues. So
Hmm.
they stop. What they do is clients will stop doing therapy, take a break, maybe a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, a month or two or three. Then they'll be like, oh, I'm ready to come back. Because you always hear them say, I'm ready to come back. I'm ready to restart therapy.
Right.
Right. So that's a big thing. What are you running from? Some therapists and clients, that therapeutic relationship is just not a good fit. Right. It's like a circle and a square, putting
Right.
a square peg in the circle. That's just not going to work. It just doesn't work. And that is
Right.
okay. That's okay.
It's an interesting question though. What are you running from? I like that because like it's very to the point and it's very like putting somebody in the spotlight and not trying to trigger them. because
Hmm.
I feel like I need an honest answer here, and we want to help you, but you got to be willing to help yourself kind of mentality. So I like that.
Yeah, and
Um,
half the time they don't, people, I'm not gonna say everybody, but some people don't know what they're running from.
yeah.
Like there can be signs that you're running. So like I used to run. I was a runner. I was a runaway ever since I was a child or like teenager. So I would even run away in my mind, right? And or dissociate, that's the correct term. And you have to ask yourself why? What? So I would even have dreams, okay? I would have dreams that I'm running. I'm running from, I'm gonna be transparent here, okay?
Hmm? Yeah.
Because I'm not scared, I'm not ashamed. I've had these dreams over like for years of me running from Michael Myers, right? And I would go all these years and not not understanding. Then I started praying and I was asking God, why do I keep having this dream? It looks the same, but it's different. But I didn't realize until later that anytime I would have a dream of me running from Michael Myers, fear was attached to it. I was scared that I was running from something. Um, but it was fear. And I was like, okay. So I had to think back. This is where you do the work, right? I was thinking back. I was like, all right. I remember when I was in the fourth grade, fifth grade, I was living in Atlanta and my family, they were watching a Michael Myers movie around like Christmas time or something. I can't remember when. And I did not like Michael. I didn't like Halloween. And it was dark, but I was scared to go upstairs to bed. I didn't want to be
Right.
upstairs by myself, so I forced myself to sit there. Just like I said in the victim advocate trainings, you force yourself to sit there and just take it, right?
Hmm.
Even though it was like really hurting me inside. So that was my fear, right? And that over the years represented me fearing things.
Wow.
Yeah, it was that deep.
Wow. Just for
So,
it to link back that far
mm,
is
fourth
is
grade.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, fourth, fifth grade. Yep.
And you said how many years did you have that dream for?
Years, years, even to now.
Wow.
Yeah. So like I'll have that dream. Matter of fact, I had one not too long ago because again, I'm human. So things will come, especially when new scenarios happen that you've never experienced, right? In life, we're always growing. We're transitioning through the different stages of life, right? So I don't know what it's like to be in like old age. Why? Because I'm not there yet. And as we transition through the stages of life, we experience new things. So I had a dream. Now, I dealt with it differently. When I woke up, I was like, what am I fearing that I should not be fearing? I had to ask myself that. I asked myself that immediately. I say, what am I worrying about? Because fear is worry, anxiety,
Yeah.
anxiousness, all of those things. And that was something I've always dealt with as, a child, anxiety. So I was like, okay, I had to be intentional. What am I, what's making me anxious?
Hmm.
And how am I going to deal with this so I don't have this anxiousness?
Right. Wow. Just to, it's crazy whenever you start having those dreams and they have powerful meanings behind them. And
Mhm.
I think I started kind of messing around with with dream stuff with my therapist like a year ago, and sometimes I'll just wake up from a crazy one. It's just like, dude, what the hell just happened? Like after my brother passed away, I couldn't sleep for like 2 months because just this might be a little triggering for anybody listening, but the sound of the coffin closing or the
Yeah.
casket when we carried him out
Yeah.
woke me up in the middle of the sleep. so many times that I couldn't sleep probably for like 2 months straight.
Wow.
And last night, crazy enough, I had a weird dream about being in the car with my friend who fell asleep at the wheel and we went into a ditch. And I was gonna go to grab some coffee today. I'm like, I am not getting in that car.
Mhm.
And just kind of like scared myself out of going outside.
Yeah.
And it's like when you have those dreams that you wake up and your heart's racing and you wake up to your alarm clock that either it's really loud or just like hauntingly has that sound you don't want to hear. Um, I hate dreams sometimes. I really do.
It can get intense.
Yeah.
There's a lot that comes with dreams. Um, so I did learn that, listen, one thing I did learn is I will come out of agreement with everything, even if that's not what the dream meant. I'll be in that place where I come out of agreement with fear, like when I had the dream with Michael Myers. First thing I come out of agreement with fear. God didn't give me the spirit of fear. He gave me love, power, and a sound mind. I just kept saying that over and over and over. And even with the whole ditch thing, even though like sometimes, a lot of the times dreams are not literal, I've learned that, but still, like I will thank God for protection. No premature death. I just come against those things. And I learned that along the way. It's all a learning process. And I realized also with the dream, because I've made similar statements, I'm like, Lord, I need a break. Like I realized like I feel like I'm just getting attacked in my dreams over and over and over. Why? It's because the way I live now, I've for me, it's just like, all right, well, the enemy, the devil, Satan, not to give him any credit, but it's like, well, they can't really shake my faith because I'm like sold out for Christ. So I feel like I get attacked while I'm asleep sometimes, and it tries to get me there. It was to the point where like, but my dreams started changing. Like I would be fighting in my dreams. Like, no, you can't have me while I'm asleep either. That type of deal. And the Bible talks about how we don't just wrestle against not flesh and blood, but spirits and principalities. That is a real thing. It's real. It is real. And when we go to sleep, things are still happening.
Right.
So one of the things that I do that was suggested, I play scriptures. I try to pray, make sure I'm praying before I go to sleep. I don't always make it to prayer before I go to sleep, but I try to do that. I may pray, play scripture. Those are the things that help me. But it all, those things bring me good sleep. There are some times where I'll play scripture and still have a dream, right? But it's just like now it's just like, okay, it's okay.
There's a quote that I heard a couple years ago, and I every time I read it, I just my mind is blown because of how powerful it is. Whenever you mention the devil, I wanted to read this to you. The
Mhm.
devil caught me with my head down and got excited until I looked up and said, "Amen."
Ooh, I remember that one before.
Oh my God. Every time I read it, it's just like, man, because the devil comes in so many different forms and beings. It could be a parent that abused you, it could be a friend that's getting ready to stab you in the back. And you know what? Every time in my life that I have felt myself in a position of being down, I
Mhm.
always, always, always can sense there's somebody watching me in a down state and just getting ready to cut my feet from under me.
Oh
And
gosh.
it always, almost always came in the form of a friend that just didn't want to see me win,
Mm,
or a mom that just didn't care enough to really be a mom for that matter. But
mm,
I love the conversation of God and the devil because like sometimes there's specific lines I've heard about the devil is like the devil was an angel in pain that never learned how to heal. I'm like, damn, that's a good one too. Like there's there's so many different ways of looking at faith and just the conversation of God and the devil. It's always an interesting conversation, and it's like I'm not sure how to really talk about it properly because I don't really have a following into that as much. But when I see simple quotes like that and
Mhm.
can share them with you who has been through some traumatic stuff in your life, I think it's really powerful to be able to share that with you.
Yeah,
Uh,
it is God who has brought me this far. Um, the enemy wanted me dead at a very since birth. And I learned with the enemy, um, his job is to kill, steal, and destroy anyway, right? Kill your spirits, kill your soul, kill you literally.
mhm.
The devil's not everywhere,
Right.
but God is. And I think that's something important that we need to remember. God
Yeah.
is everywhere. The devil's not everywhere. That means we have protection.
Hmm.
We have protection. We have victory. We have the victory. We already won. And I it's to a point where it's just like I don't care. The Satan is irrelevant.
Love it.
Irrelevant. And when you say like try to cut your feet, no, see, the devil's underneath our feet.
Hmm.
And these are the things that I declare. That is part of my self-care, prayer, and declaring these things. The enemy's underneath my feet. Why is that important? Because I need to get through another day. And the arrows, the fiery arrows, the weapons, they're real. That comes to us every day to make us lose faith, to discourage us, to make us have suicidal ideation, make us want to take us out, there are people that want to kill others, right? These thoughts that guess what? You do that, your life is destroyed, right?
Right.
You
Right.
destroyed your life hurting somebody else.
Yeah.
Anyway, the enemy can, he will try to take you out. But we
Absolutely.
have protection and victory.
Right. I love that. Um, what are some common challenges you see in your clients, and how do you help them overcome these obstacles?
Well, I have a lot of clients who's experienced trauma,
Hmm.
childhood trauma, some domestic violence. But a lot of them, experience a lot of just like discouragement and just need empowerment and resilience. So, that's one of the things I highlight in my therapy is resilience and empowerment. And I let them know, like, I don't, you've come from all of this. You are strong, right? I tell them these things, especially, the ones that's experienced the childhood trauma. And I tell them, like, you can't go back and change what happened in the past. You can't change what happened in the past. So, like, we deal with the low self-worth that's attached to experiencing trauma or low self-esteem. And the self-care, it's so funny that you love that because that is one of the things that I teach. Self-care and that work-life balance for the working adults. How are you taking care of yourself? A lot of people, clients that I have worked with don't, or they haven't, right? And it's important to give them those tools. And I've worked with many different people, like even from just victim advocate to the children to different adults. I've worked with some substance use clients. Just that is a trend that I have seen, especially with that anxiety
Yeah.
and low self-worth and not believing that they can overcome, not believing that they can move forward.
Hmm. You had mentioned inner child work. Um, how important do you think that is to your therapy teachings? Because I feel like for me that was one of the very first things that I had to learn how to heal is to, see that kid in the mirror and let them know that you're there to take care of them now when you couldn't when you were younger. So how important is inner child work for you?
We go back to inner child if that's what they want to do. I try to guide them to the future,
Hmm.
hope, right? There's hope for them. How do they see a healthier version of themselves. They can't go back to childhood.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with addressing that because there are things in so there are things that happened in childhood that of course that you know it is the reason why you behave the way you behave or why you think how you think. You know how they say nurture versus nature?
Yeah.
Like both.
Right.
Both.
Right.
And a lot of the clients that I work with, they want to go forward,
Right.
forward. So we will go back to the past if that's what they choose. I give them, I believe in autonomy. So I let them choose if that's what they want to do. And a
I
lot of
think
them,
I think that's a very smart approach. Just considering if you're wanting to move forward and give them the hope of doing so, because I do understand that aspect of going back to the past and not wanting to stay back there. Because I feel like when you're in your healing journey and you're trying to figure everything out and why certain things happen in your life, I feel like sometimes we can find ourselves being stuck in that why for a while. And while you're making progress, you're still going back on, yeah, but shit, I wish this didn't happen. Why did this happen? And then you get to be, at my age of not having a relationship with their parents because of said things that happen and me understanding the type of people that they are now. Um, I feel like the inner child work is, I love that you make it a choice because I definitely feel like it could be a trap for some that aren't ready to address that too.
they'll get stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of them. And, some clients need to just talk it. I'll let them talk it out
Mhm.
and I'll just listen because they need to get those things off their chest, out their heart. They need to release that. But can I get stuck? And it's talking about the past, even with the trauma work. A lot of the times I remember like even my experience talking about my sexual molestation as a child and the domestic violence. When I first started talking about these things, I couldn't. Like my body would go into a hyper arousal state. And I would just get so nervous, so anxious, right? And it's like, no, that doesn't work for me. And a lot of the times it doesn't work for people. Because then, we've seen these clients once a week. And now every therapist has their own approach, right? But again, like mine is focused on empowerment and resilience. So it's important to talk about the things from the past, but we're not like it's not in detail.
Yeah.
If they need to talk about detail, okay, why did you need to talk about it in the details?
Mhm.
Like, how is that talking about the details of it? Where's that? How's that factoring in your life now? Like finding those connections. That's
Yeah.
important, right? But we still have to move forward because again, they can get stuck. And there are clients that are actually still stuck. Even as an adult, they're adult physically, but mentally they're stuck in their childhood.
Right. So do you
And
feel like essentially opening old wounds could kind of just make it bleed over everything and I guess essentially almost, I don't want to say impossible because I don't believe in the word impossible, but do you think it makes it more difficult for them to heal because they're ripping old wounds open, like revisiting the past kind of thing?
if if you don't have the tools to give them, okay, so look at it like a womb, right? I remember I had a dream about this before. I saw I was being dunked in the water over and over and over. And then I have to get this band-aid on, and the band-aid kept coming off. kept coming off. I kept go back under the water, take the band-aid off. Over and over again. I was like, oh, I'm tired of the dream. And I realized like that meant that there were wounds that needed to be healed correctly. The
Hmm.
bandage needs to be taken off, but it needed to be healed properly because
Hmm.
some people have wounds, right? Emotional wounds, but they didn't heal properly. So you have to revisit these things, but you don't want to just revisit something and you don't have the right material to heal it,
Right.
right? You
Right.
don't want to open up a wound, right? Say you have a splinter or something and just your skin didn't healed over that.
Yeah.
You open that up to take the splinter out and you don't have nothing to bandage it up with. That's dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
so it's
the
just like
infection. Right.
that. You got to
Hmm.
have tools to give them
Hmm.
so they can move forward and not get stuck.
Right. Right. That makes sense. That definitely makes sense. Um,
I know my analogy was all over the place.
no, no, it helped me. I guess it helped me better
Get sincere.
understand because like you said, everybody has a different approach in therapy. So like,
Yeah.
I guess that was more or less for me because the inner child work was something that I wanted to focus on first before anything else. And
Like,
like
what
you
would you
said,
tell your younger self that?
yeah, yeah, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And just kind of being that person for everybody else I wish I had kind of thing.
Mm,
And there it was probably about a year's worth of therapy there
yeah.
for that. But I definitely understand your point a lot more now. I appreciate the analogy because it helped my brain understand. Um, so you had written a book, Life
Okay, yeah.
After Trauma. Tell
Hmm.
us a little bit about that.
Ooh, it hurt to write it. That book was sitting under my bed collecting dust in a notebook. I
Really?
remember in my house in Maryland, and I had just quit my job, left to go for my military job and stuff. And the Lord said, pull that book out. And I pulled it, I was dusty. And this was before I knew the title, Life After Trauma. But I was writing it. It was very painful. That book specifically was my life. I started writing it after I got out of domestic violence. The book is for any survivors that experience abuse, but I wrote that when I left out of domestic violence, when I moved into a new home and was beginning to see it or experience what freedom looked like and start my healing process. So I was writing it then. It kind of like highlights well, the first chapter is it's going to be more than okay. So that's that encouragement, like, oh, okay, you got out of domestic violence, you made it out this far, it's going to be more okay, meaning there's so much life for you, right? Whatever you've been through, you made it out. We've made it this far. It's going to be more okay than okay, right? Because there's good for you, and you can live a life after trauma, a good life. You can have healthy relationships with your significant other, with yourself, with God, with your children. And, chapter 4 talks about Jeziah, my precious jewel. I mean, Jeziah, my precious son. um that's chapter 4. It gets very touchy because I took my son through domestic violence with me, so he experienced secondhand trauma, so he watched things, and in that it was a letter apologizing to him. It
Wow.
was a message to him. Why? Because I put him in that situation and I needed to take accountability and apologize because that's what I felt like I owed him. He didn't ask to be in that. And that was important. There are a lot of parents, mothers who drag their children through that, right? Not saying drag in a bad, negative way.
I got dragged through
Uh,
it.
not to look at the word drag is in a negative
Yeah.
way, but we take our kids through these things and we're in it, you're in the middle of it,
Hmm.
and it's just like your kid is watching this, right? And when I wrote the book, I was just praying, like, Lord, Please erase that from his mind. Please don't let him grow up to do what he saw. Like, please heal him, all these different things. He grew
How
up to
old
be
is he
a very
now?
fine young man. And I give all that glory to God. Like, the Lord had to teach me how to be a mother. So it talks about that in the book. Being
Did he ever
hit.
read the letter?
He read it. He was like, "Why you put me in that book?" I said, "This is my story."
I
He said,
love it.
"Put it in there." But he's my only son. He's my only child,
How old
and
is he now?
he's 18 now. He'll be,
Okay.
but he was younger. It's like, why you put this in here? But it was healing to me because, as a mother, I had that guilt. Like, I did this too. And I found myself like apologizing too for a while. But I had to like eventually, stop apologizing because it's just like, okay, you have to forgive you. I had to forgive myself as a mother for what I took him through. So I talk about that in the book. Um, I love towards the end of the book, not to give the whole book, but towards the end of the book, it says that we're precious jewels. Like, that is how God sees us. We are delicate. Women are delicate. God's children is delicate. Men are delicate, right? Women and men. We are humans, and nobody deserves that. And when we go through trauma or abuse, specifically abuse, it does something to it can damage your identity. It could damage how you see yourself. It could damage your self-esteem and your self-worth. Make you hate yourself. I was going through a period where I hated myself and I had to heal from all of that. So my book talks about those things, and it's to inspires the one who has overcome abuse that listen, you can overcome. You're an overcomer. Speaking in existence, you are an overcomer. There's a good life waiting for you.
Love that. I love that so much. Um, just a brief question about your son. What is the most important lesson that you have found to teaching him?
um, Put God first. That God is his father. The reason that was the most important lesson is because it was just me and him.
Hmm.
And my parenting was not perfect. Okay. There was a lot I had to learn. They say parenting doesn't come with a handbook. And I was like, just always put God first into love. Love people and take care of other people. I taught him that at a very young age to take care of people. And that's what he does. He takes care of other people in different ways. And I look back and I'm like, man, I planted that seed and it has, sprouted and grown into something beautiful.
I love that so much. That's beautiful. I'd like to ask every one of my guests this question. So, if you could change one thing in this community, what would it be?
I am a diehard advocate for sexual abuse or sexual trauma awareness, bystander prevention. I advocate for that. I would say do your part. That's what I would change. I would say stop abusing people. Stop sexually assaulting people. That's the message to the perpetrators. Okay. Perpetrator could be man or woman, male or female. Okay. I would change that. If sexual abuse could go away, that's what I would want because
And
it
stop the blind
damages.
eye stuff too, like pretending like something didn't happen or you didn't see something happen.
Yeah, that's why you got bystanders.
Yeah,
They in the military we say you see something, say something.
right,
And we learned that, saying something and not saying something kind of make you guilty too.
right.
Right? It's almost as bad as doing that thing.
Absolutely.
It's just like we all have our part. But if I had to change something, it would be just keep your hands to yourself.
Yeah,
Right? Sexual abuse, it doesn't just hurt you, it hurts generations.
absolutely. Absolutely. Um, So before we read the quote to close out the podcast, I just want to say because I forgot to say at the beginning of the podcast, thank you for your service because
Huh.
you're in the military, so thank you for your
Thank
service.
you.
Um, at the end of every podcast, I like to read a quote, mental health based or just an inspiring quote. If you have the scripture that you wanted to read, please feel free.
Okay. Oh, you want me to go first?
Yeah, yeah, you can go first. Yeah,
I do. Hold on, I'm pulling it up.
I can read mine first if you want.
Okay, because I don't want to paraphrase. I want to give it word for word.
Yeah. Okay. So
Okay.
the quote that I have is by Miss Mandy Hale. You don't always need a plan. Sometimes you just need to breathe, trust, let go, and see what happens.
Mm. Breathe, trust, let go, and see what happens. I like that. Breathe.
Especially
Breathe
the
is
breathe
important.
part. Yeah.
Let
The
go. I like that.
yeah.
I like that. That's a good one. Um, my quote is from God Himself. Again, it's Isaiah 41, 10 and actually 13. It says, Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, and I will uphold you with my right hand of righteousness. And in 13, he says, For I am the Lord thy God. I will hold your right hand, saying, Fear not, I will help you. Listen, I love that one because we have
Beautiful.
help.
Yeah.
We don't have to fear.
Right. I think it's important that we incorporate faith-based stuff in all aspects of life because I feel having a belief system, regardless if it's God or if it's Buddha, whoever it is, I feel like it's very important to have a faith-based system or a belief system of some sort. It helps all of us get by in some fashion. Um, before we close out today's podcast, where can our listeners find you?
Uh, I have a website. You can find me on www.vanitydawson.com. I'm on Instagram, Vanity C Dawson, and then I'm also on YouTube with Survivor Talks.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Vanity, for coming on today's podcast. This was a really powerful conversation, and I'm glad I got to know you a little bit better.
Thank you, Chris, for having me, and it was a pleasure to be able to share my story or my testimony and just, be able to just help the next person. So I appreciate
Absolutely.
you inviting me on.
And for all my listeners, thank you guys for your support as always. Till next time, much love, and as always, be gentle with yourselves. Take care, guys.